All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dig into an idea from psychology that is so radical, it challenges pretty much everything we've been taught to believe about our past. We're diving deep into the core message of the first part of the massive bestseller, The Courage to be Disliked, which basically argues that trauma, as we know it, is a myth.
So let's kick things off with a huge question, one I'm sure you've wrestled with. Is your past really writing your future? I mean, for the last 100 years, most of psychology, starting with Freud, has basically said, yeah, absolutely. But there's this completely different perspective that says your past has exactly zero power over you. None.
Okay, so on one hand, we've got what's called etiology. This is the one we all kind of know, right? The whole cause and effect thing. Something bad happened to you back then, and that's the cause of your problems today. Simple. But on the other side, we have teleology. And this is a totally different way of looking at things. It says we don't act because of past causes, we act to achieve present goals. It's all about purpose.
So, where does this wild idea come from? Well, it's from a guy often called the unknown third giant of psychology, right up there with the legends Freud and Jung. His name was Alfred Adler.
So Adler was actually right there with Freud in the same room, part of the same psychoanalytic society. But his thinking was so different, so revolutionary, that he had to break away and start his own school of thought. And here's the crazy part. You might not know his name, but I guarantee you've run into his ideas. Dale Carnegie, Stephen Covey, so much of modern self-help is built right on top of Adler's foundation.
Okay, so how does this whole thing actually play out in real life? To really get the difference between these two worldviews, the book gives us this perfect example. It's the story of a young man who's so anxious he hasn't been able to leave his room for years.
Now, the standard way of thinking, that cause and effect model, would tell us to look straight to the past. Maybe he was bullied, maybe he had a rough childhood. That past trauma is the clear cause of why he can't leave his room now. Makes sense, right? It seems totally logical.
But Adlerian psychology just flips that completely on its head. It says, no. The young man first has the goal, I don't want to go out. Maybe he wants his parents' special attention, or maybe he's avoiding the pressures of the real world. So, to achieve that goal, he actually creates the anxiety he feels. The anxiety is the perfect excuse to stay inside. It's not the cause, it's a tool.
So this is the real game changer. Etiology basically says, you're a product of your past. You're kind of stuck with it. But teleology, it says, nope, you're the one in the driver's seat right now. The power isn't in what happened to you, it's in the purpose you're choosing to follow in this very moment.
And this way of thinking, well, it leads us to Adler's most provocative, most controversial claim. And honestly, it's an idea that challenges the entire foundation of how we usually think about mental health.
Just let that sink in for a second. In Adler's world, trauma, as a reason or justification for our current behavior, is completely and totally denied. Now hold on, this doesn't mean bad stuff doesn't happen. Of course it does. What it means is that those events don't get to determine who we are today. They don't have that power.
And Adler himself puts it perfectly here. The key phrase is, the meaning we give them is self-determining. This is such a massive shift in perspective. It means no event, no matter how awful, has a built-in meaning. We are the ones who decide what that experience means. We decide if it's a story of defeat or a story of resilience. That's where the real power is.
Okay, but what about emotions, like anger, right? Surely those are just automatic reactions we can't control. Well, Adler would say, not so fast. Let's take a look at a really simple, everyday example from the book.
And of course, he thinks his anger just happened. It was automatic, right? The coffee spill made him angry. It was an uncontrollable impulse. But Adler would push back and ask, was it really? Or did that anger serve a purpose?
But if we look at it from Adler's point of view, it's a completely different story. The man's goal was simple: get the waiter to submit, to listen, and to take him seriously fast. Now, a quiet, polite chat might not do that, but shouting? That works. So in a split second, he creates this big show of anger. It wasn't an impulse, it was a tool he used to get exactly what he wanted.
So you can see how all these pieces, denying trauma, seeing emotions as tools, start to fit together. And they all point to one really powerful conclusion about our own happiness and our ability to change.
Adler has this term, lifestyle.
And it's not about your house or your car. It's your personality, your entire way of looking at the world and yourself. And here's the wild part. He says we aren't born with it. We actually choose this lifestyle, maybe without even realizing it, when we're about 10 years old. And then we just keep living it out.
Okay, so if we picked it in the first place, why is it so hard to change when we're not happy? Adler's answer is pretty straightforward. It's not about ability, it's about courage. We are constantly, actively making the decision not to change. Why? Because it's easier, it's familiar. Even if it's painful, staying the same feels a lot safer than the scary unknown territory of becoming someone new.
And this really gets to the absolute core of the book. As this quote says, it's not that you can't change, it's that you lack the courage to do it. So according to Adler, your unhappiness isn't something to be blamed on your past, but it is something you have the power to change. Adlerian psychology is a psychology of courage.
So what's the big takeaway from all this? It's about a massive shift in where you put your focus. It's about stop looking backward at the equipment you were given, the things you can't change. The only thing that truly matters is what you choose to do with that equipment right here, right now.
And that leaves us with one last, really big question to think about. If your past truly has no power over you, if your life is actually being determined by the purpose you choose in this very moment, then what are you going to do now?